bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the most read group of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more, all featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL, from the great one to the next one, from the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm here with HockeyRaters.com. It is Tuesday as we record this. It'll be Wednesday when you folks watch it, but we've got a couple guys with us that cover the Edmonton Oilers closely. Colton Pankiw is with us. Colton, how are you doing today?
Good, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. And, of course, Brian Swane is with us as always. Brian, how are you?
Good, Jim. How you doing?
Good. Well, this week we're going to talk about a fewer – I guess the stories were always written for us prior to this, right? Like every week we had a story coming in and was a big news item. This week, maybe not as big. There's some stuff that we still want to talk about, some lingering topics that we haven't covered because the news has been so big leading up to this week, but there's still plenty to talk about. So we're going to do that right now. And anybody who's watching this for the first time, we hope you enjoy the show. Feel free to comment on it if you're watching it on YouTube or Facebook or wherever. Hit the notification button for other future videos and subscribe to the channels because those are really helpful for us. But Colton, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk a little bit about the one deal. I guess there were two deals that happened. I think we even said it to Brian last week. I said, you know what's going to happen, right? We're thinking about doing a show this week, and then Ken Holland's going to be listening, and then he's going to sign somebody. Well, like clockwork, he signs Tyler Benson and Slater Koekkoek. So let's talk first a little bit about Slater Koekkoek because here's a guy who was with the team last year. I think he played in all of 17 games. Didn't really get a fair shake because he got injured, was out for most of the season. But when he did come back for, I think it was the final game of the year, Tippett played him a lot, played him like 17 minutes or something in that game. So he's an interesting guy because we don't really know what he's going to be. He's going to be a depth defenseman for the Oilers, but we don't know how often he's going to play. We don't really know how much Dave Tippett likes him, but we get the sense that he likes him a lot. Where do you see Slater Koekkoek fitting in this lineup, Colton?
I think he'll be kind of a guy that can come in and out of the lineup. I actually didn't mind the signing. I thought before he got hurt last year, albeit a small sample size, I thought he played pretty well. I was a bit surprised at the second year just because I don't really know who they were outbidding there. But, I mean, it's such a small AAV that I guess it's not the end of the world. But I think he'll, kind of be a 6th, 7th guy in and out of the lineup. And like I said, I liked him last year, so I'm not too upset about it.
Well, you said something very interesting. I thought this immediately when I read the signing, and then you look back not that long ago to Devon Shore in the second year, and we had the same conversation about Devon Shore. Why would you sign him for 2 years? Who are you competing against? I absolutely believe they weren't competing against anybody, but I get the sense that Ken Holland likes these kinds of deals. I think what he sees is potentially a guy that could fit. He likes what he offers. Tippett likes and maybe if they're healthy or they play well, could be a very like Slater Koekkoek is the one guy that I think could be a really big value if he plays a full season this coming season, and then he shows how valuable he can be at $750K next year. If he plays a full season and he gets himself in a role at the 6th spot or lines that up or really solidifies himself in that position, he's going to be a deal at $750. I don't wonder if Ken Holland looks at it that way. He says, look, I'm going to take a 2-year gamble on these guys. I know that I like them. If I can get him in now and I don't have to pay $1 million for him later or whatever, right? Like maybe that's what he's thinking. I'm not sure. Brian, what's your thoughts on the Slater Koekkoek signing?
Yeah, that's vintage Ken Holland, isn't it? Like every contract he gives out, it seems to be a year or two longer than we think it should be, right? I mean, the Mike Smith comes in at 2 years. We all thought that Hyman, as much as we like the signing, probably should be a little bit a year or two off that. Nurse, of course, was long-term. So, yeah, you're right. This just seems to be his MO. And I think your theory there is probably some good perspective onto what his insight or some insight into what he might be, why he is making these kind of moves. As far as Slater Koekkoek goes, I mean, this is an interesting dude to me. Like I liked what he brought to the team too. Again, as you guys have pointed out, in a small sample size, he did get into those 4 playoff games. Thought he did all right in that. But this is a guy like he's been he drafted, I think 2012. Top 10 pick in 2012. He's played 167 career games, I think it is. Like he's never played more than 45 or so games in a single season. Like he's a fascinating guy to me because I've always liked what I've seen of him. And the only 2 times I've really paid close attention to him in his career would be this season with the Oilers and last summer in the playoff bubble. And I think we all agree that he was very good in that series against the Oilers.
Colton, why do you think there's less kickback to this deal? I mean, like you said, you like him. I like him. Brian seems to like him, but we haven't seen him very much. We've seen him all of like 20 games total between the regular season and the play, but nobody seems to be causing a stink over this. Like some people, like you have mentioned, and others have said, that second year is a little surprising, but nobody seems to be too like flabbergasted with this signing. And there were people like Jordy Ben that might have been on the Oilers' radar and other depth defensemen that could have been signed instead, but everybody seems to be okay with the Koekkoek deal. Despite how little we know about him. Do you think it was the experience playing against him when he was with Chicago that did it, or people are just waiting to see what he can do when he gets most of a regular season in?
Well, I think I had seen some things I know with the Devon Shore signing, people were really upset going over his advanced stats. It was really the analytics crew that didn't like that signing. And I'd seen some things on Slater Koekkoek where his numbers, again, small sample size, but were pretty good last season. So I do wonder if that plays into effect of kind of that crowd is more okay with it just because they like what they're seeing on the advanced stats sheet. So I think that's probably the big part of it. That being said, if he gets off to a bad start this year and those numbers take a dive, then you might hear that crowd come up more.
I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think he's one of the rare guys that he has the analytics that, or the analytics crowd like his advanced stats numbers, but he's also got the kind of game that people who are just more traditional, just like, judge a guy based on how he plays. There's a lot to like with that too. So he's that rare kind of guy that wins over both crowds, or rare depth player at least that wins over both crowds.
Yeah, he's not one dimensional, so to speak. Like the knock on a guy like Chris Russell is that all he does is block shots, right? The knock on somebody like a Tyson Berry is all he does is score points on a power play, but with guys like McDavid or whatever. Like there's no, I don't want to say that Slater Koekkoek's like super good at any one thing, but he's not bad at any one thing either. And I think the well-roundedness of his game, even though it's in a depth role, the fact that he's cheap and he can play both sides, left side, right side, can go pretty much anywhere and can play 18 minutes if you ask him to, versus is comfortable playing 13. I mean, maybe that's what people like about him is his versatility and all that kind of stuff. One of the guys that I'm interested in talking about too is Tyler Benson. So we've seen now, here's a guy that maybe the Oilers thought they were going to lose to Seattle. Didn't lose him to Seattle because the Adam Larson thing all happened. So Tyler Benson sticks with the Oilers and now he signs again. Is this his last shot, Colton? Do you think this is kind of the be all end all for Tyler Benson? If he doesn't get a crack at the lineup this year, we probably won't be hearing about him much after this.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I almost kind of think that he's already on the outside looking in, just heading into camp. I hope I'm wrong. Just I like his numbers in the minors and everything. And obviously he's like a homegrown guy. So I do hope that he can get a shot there, but I don't know. I'm not feeling great about it. Albeit I haven't seen him play much at all in the minors, but I just know his skating is always an issue. And I've just kind of felt like management and coaching staff aren't super high on him. So I think he's going to have a really good camp to win some people over.
Colton, let's stick with you for just a second. Do you think the coaching staff has soured on him just based on, what had happened leading up to now? Like from what I understand, he's working a lot on his foot speed. He had a really decent year last year. It's sort of like a fresh start for him. In his mind, he's ready to go. But in Tippett's mind and previous coaching regimes, Tyler Benson wasn't able to take that step. Do you think that saddled him a little bit? Or do you think the Oilers are actually looking at this going, well, yeah, clean slate for a dude?
I think you can say clean slate as much as you want, but I think it's hard to get rid of thoughts that you've had in the past, right? It's always going to be there. So I think there's always going to be that little shadow of doubt over him, whether fair or not. So I think just looking at the players they have on their roster right now, like I said, I think it would take a pretty big camp for him to get in the lineup. I'm rooting for him. I don't know.
Ryan, do you think his pedigree as a natural scorer, his ability, in the minors, pretty much every other league he's ever played in, he's scored like crazy. Do you think that's going to help him, maybe give him the extra edge? Because the one guy we saw last year was Ryan McLeod, but Cooper Marody, Tyler Benson were a huge part of that 3-man unit in Bakersfield. And McLeod was the only one that get the call up, really. I mean, Marody's gotten a cup of coffee, and Benson, I think, got 7 games or something at one point. But we haven't seen Benson get anything else, but he's got that pedigree, that skill, that scoring ability that everybody talks about. And for so many fans who haven't really seen Tyler Benson play, they know an awful lot about Tyler Benson based on what everybody says and how often he could score. Do you think that reputation alone as a guy who you could get that opportunity, and if he seizes it, could really score a lot? Do you think that's going to give him an extra peak, an extra set of eyeballs?
I unfortunately kind of echo Colton's thoughts here. I just don't think he's going to get a chance. I've always really liked the kid too, and would like to see him get that opportunity. It looked like he might get it this year, right? I mean, they didn't have left wing was obviously a great issue of depth for this team, but all of a sudden here they've gone out, they've gotten Hyman, they've gotten Fogle, and even Brendan Perlini now is in the mix for that spot too. So I don't see where he figures into the plans. And if they really even wanted to give him the slightest bit of opportunity, like they're not putting him in a situation here to go out and get that brass ring, and they never have. He's never that. I think that's the most frustrating part. If you know what, maybe he's a career minor leaguer. Maybe that's all he is, or maybe he's a guy who could be a 20 goal scorer in the NHL. But we won't know until you give him that opportunity. And multiple regimes now in this organization have, for whatever reason, just not. So whatever his reputation may be in the minors, it doesn't seem to have influenced the powers that be when you're talking at the NHL level.
Colton said, I think you said you were in the minority on this one. And Brian, do you believe that too? Because the one thing we heard about leading into the expansion draft was, man, the Oilers can't lose Tyler Benson. Like, what are you doing? Protect this, but don't lose Tyler Benson. So if you both believe that he's not going to get a shot this year, are you in the minority, you guys, that there's a lot of fans that think Tyler Benson's going to get a shot? Like, why would anybody be so bent out of shape about the potential of losing this guy? And he's really never done anything for the Edmonton Oilers. And we don't know if he's going to do anything for any other team. Brian, do you guys think that the fan base, the regular viewers of the Oilers, believe this guy's going to get a shot?
Good question. I don't think so. I mean, I think he should. Just to be clear, I think he can do things at this level, but I don't know. There doesn't seem to be the noise being made this summer that I might have remembered in previous years around him, like giving him a shot. I think that's probably just more to do, maybe not so much about him, but about the depth this team has now. Like, this team is pretty much solidified if you look at the top four lines. And I don't know too. The other side of this too is, like, for him to thrive or be a productive NHL player, I'm not quite sure what role he fits into. Where you can have a regular spot and be a regular contributor game in, game out. So I don't know. I think the ship has just sailed overall. Like, the fact that they only gave him the 1 year deal too, or the 1 year on this contract this time out. It's just, I don't know. All signs point to if he has a shot, he's going to get it elsewhere.
I'd be interested to see, Cole, and I'll ask you if you think there's any potential for this after I kind of make this point here, but I'd be very interested to see if the Oilers believe what you both believe, which is really that there's not a whole lot of opportunity. Something would have, let's put it this way, something would have to go sideways and an opening, occur for Tyler Benson to get a legitimate shot, is what I think both of you were saying. So yeah. Having said that, why not trade the guy? Like, if that's what you really believe, because from what we understand, there's some teams around the league that like this guy. Like, they think he could do well in a different role for a different team. So why not trade him if the Oilers? And two, Colton, do you think that there's any potential, should that window open up, that this hole be created for Benson? And knock on wood that there's no major injuries, that this has to happen. But could Tyler Benson be a Kailer Yamamoto type of player where he comes in for 17 or 26 games or whatever it was, gets 26 points in 27 games? Like, does Benson have, maybe we don't know enough about him, but we didn't know a lot about Kailer Yamamoto either, other than the fact that he was drafted really high and we believe that he could be, but he did for 27 games. He scored like crazy. Could Tyler Benson do that here? So one, why don't you trade him? And two, if he gets the shot, do you think he can make the most of it?
Well, why don't you trade him? I think right now, I guess it is an interesting point. I think his value, like you said, even though it sounds like there are teams that are interested, I don't think they get much back for him at this point. He just hasn't done anything at the NHL level. And then for the second point, I do think that he could do that. It would obviously depend what opening's there, right? Because again, I don't know a ton about the player, but like, can he play a bottom six role? I would assume he's more suited for a top six, obviously, with all the skill he has. So if he gets put on a line with a Draisaitl or McDavid, then yeah, of course, I think he has the skill level. He's proven that at other levels, but it would just depend kind of what spot in the lineup he's put on. Obviously, if he's on the fourth line, then no, like, he's not going to produce like that. But if he does get a top six opportunity, then yeah.
Because that's and we're going to talk about this in a second. That's exactly what happened with Yamamoto, right? Like, he comes up, he gets that top six role, and he thrives in it. Now he had a big step back this last season, even though we like the way that he played the game. I think we're all in agreement there. He just wasn't able to put it in the net and do other stuff. So, man, it would be something if Benson came in and got that shot and really made the most of it. It would create a really good problem to have if you're the Edmonton Oilers, I suppose. But let's switch gears and talk a little bit about Kailer Yamamoto, because there's a lot of uncertainty around this player. I get the sense the fan base is a little nervous. I don't know why, but he hasn't been signed yet. That's one of the biggest pieces of business that Ken Holland still has to take care of. Brian, I'll start with you. Do you think that this is really an issue? Like, I don't believe Yamamoto is going to get any more than like $2 million. I can't see it. He doesn't hold any of the cards. He has no art rights. He's an RFA. I don't know why you would believe after the season that he had last year that you would get $2.5 to $3 million for this player if you're his agent. I don't see it. Everybody else seems to be a little nervous that this number is going to be higher than it should be or whatever. What does he have any leverage? Like, what kind of a deal do you think the Oilers are probably going to get Kailer Yamamoto on when this finally gets done?
Yeah, I'd be stunned if it's anywhere near $2 million. Like you said, the organization holds the hammer on this. And it's, it's not like he's coming off the greatest of seasons either. Sophomore slump, call it what you want. I mean, I think I'm with you guys. I think that he's a lot better than what he showed last year, and he will get to that point again. But yeah, I don't know what the holdup is. It is kind of curious. Like, it's one of those things that you kind of wonder why this wasn't done X number of weeks ago. I wonder if there is more than meets the eye. This is kind of almost, it's an entirely different scenario, but it kind of reminds me of like Adam Larson, where we were just talking and assuming the deal would get done. And then as things kind of start to unravel and you learn more, you find out. But I would be stunned. I don't even know what I think maybe 1.25 might be.
I'm going to guess that's a little low. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if it's 1.75, maybe even 2. Like, I think he could get 2 for 2 years. 2 years, 2 by 2. I think that's realistic. But people thinking 2.5 and 3, nah, there's just no chance of that happening. And I also don't think it's going to be $1 million. Like, I know some people are like, man, just really hammer. I don't think Holland's the kind of guy that wants to just absolutely hammer it to a dude who had a bad. Like, I don't get the sense from him that he's doing that. To your Adam Larson point, though, I think it's a little different in that the RFA no arb rights versus the UFA thing is quite a different thing. But I hope there's no tension building between the two sides. Like, I can't imagine that Yamamoto believes that he's going to hit a home run after the season he just had.
Well, let's throw this up there. Not necessarily what we think he will sign for, but what is the market value for this guy? Like, what is a fair asking price if you're him? I think he's like a 1.5 value player right now.
Yeah, it could be. Like, I think comparables put him in between around 1.5 and 2.2-ish. Like, if you're looking at different players in different organizations who were in kind of similar situations, that's kind of where you're at. Some people in those ranges had a little bit better offensive numbers. I have names, and while Colton answers the question, I'll look them up. But Colton, what do you think? Like, is this just a matter of time before this deal gets done, or is this something that we might want to be a little bit concerned about because it hasn't happened yet?
Well, it's like Brian said, it's kind of odd. Like, it seems like a deal that after last season, he really didn't play well. So it should be easy to get hammered out. So it's kind of curious that it's drug on this long, especially like given the fact I don't think he's going to get any kind of money. Like you guys said, he got ample opportunity last year and didn't do much at all. I think he scored 8 goals all season. So he really doesn't have any reason to get paid a whole lot. So I'm hoping kind of around what Brian said, 1.5, maybe 1.75, but it is a bit curious that it hasn't gotten done yet.
Yeah. I was mentioning 2 comparables here. Kurt Levens at the Edmonton Journal wrote that Valerie Nichushkin out of Colorado got 2.5 times 2, but that was prior to the COVID pandemic outbreak, which we know has dropped the market a lot. And then Maxime Comtois out of Anaheim got 2.04 million, and he had better numbers than Yamamoto. So that gives you somewhat of a ballpark we might be looking at here. It would be interesting to see, though, if the Oilers can convince him. I don't know if it's a convincing matter, but to get him in 2 years. Because if he does, like, do you think Yamamoto, Brian, is it the guy that we saw in 2019-20 or more the guy we saw in 2020-21? Like, Yamamoto was easily expected to score like 18 to 20 goals based on the 26 games that he had with the Oilers in 2019. Do you think he's that kind of guy? Like, if the Oilers get him, at 1.6 or 1.7 for 2 years, like, could he be the best value contract in the Oilers by the end of that 2-year deal?
It's a great point. Yeah, I do think, I mean, I believe he's more of the guy that we saw in the first 2.5 months of 2020 than what we saw last season. He wouldn't be the first guy that has a great first foray into the NHL and then, hits the skids in his second year and then goes on to have a good career. I mean, this is nothing out of the ordinary. I think you hit on the point earlier, Jim, like we still liked what he was doing. We saw what he brought to the games out there. The pucks just weren't going in for him. He wasn't able to put them in the net. He's, like I said, not the first guy to go through this kind of a slump, especially in his position, and won't be the last. I do believe that what we saw in 2020, I think that's he's got that player in him. And, I think too, it would I'm going to be interested to see what if they stick with the new Draisaitl Yamamoto line, because I still think there's magic to be unlocked in that line. And I think that makes him that much more valuable. So yeah, I think this could be a very good value contract for sure.
One of the things I'm interested in, and Colton, I'll get your take on this in a second. One of the things that I'm kind of curious about is whether or not, I don't get the sense from his behavior, his demeanor, his his body language that he was nervous because of the boy he plays. He's not, but he was on a first real contract year, had a good, short stint with the Oilers before. He just didn't shoot. Like, here's a player who grinds, who works hard, plays way, way bigger than his actual physical size, but he passed way more often than I ever would have expected a guy like him to pass. Like, I really believe that maybe there was a little bit of nervous tension going on there. Like, man, I'm playing for a contract here, and it didn't go. Sometimes people do really well on a contract year and they play lights out, and it just went the other way for him. But I just wonder if Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins are like, dude, shoot. Like, you just need to shoot. We're going to get it to you. All you got to do is shoot. Quit passing up the shots. Do you believe there was any kind of like nervousness about really playing for a contract here, and the Yamamoto just kind of like said, well, man, I got the best guys on this team in McDavid and Draisaitl and Nugent. I should be giving it to them instead of taking it and doing what I did successfully in my 26 game stint before.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never actually thought of it from that perspective. I kind of seen the same things last year, but to me, it kind of screamed a guy that was just lacking confidence. I think he came in probably expecting to have a huge year after what he did in 2019-20, like you guys had said. And I think it just didn't go his way pretty much right from the beginning. And I think that kind of just got on him and stayed for the whole season. So I'm just really hoping that the off season's enough to kind of just come back in, have a good summer, come back in, fresh start. And then I don't know if we'll see the same players 2019-20. I don't know if I see him being a point per game player, but I do expect him to be a lot better than last season. So I really hoping that he's able to shake that off and come back better.
Yeah, even if he could score 40, 45 points, plop in 15, maybe have a sniff at 20, like that's a really good value at the number that they're probably going to wind up paying him this summer. So it'll be very interesting to see where that goes. All right, our final topic, and we talked a little bit about him because of the fact of the Yamamoto line with Nugent Hopkins, is Leon Draisaitl. We're about a day removed from the 4-year anniversary of that contract. And the reason that we're probably so curious about it now is because we've seen some of these contracts in a flat cap era just balloon, right? Darnell Nurse just signed a $9.25 million 8-year extension. So he's going to be with the Oilers for the next 9 years. A lot of people are freaking out about this contract, but the same people probably freaked out about Leon Draisaitl's contract at the time that he signed it, which was $8.5 million, which now has turned out to be one of, even though it's a high price contract, one of the best deals in hockey, because he's absolutely shown that he is a top 5 player in the NHL. He's been second, if not first in league scoring for the last 2 seasons. Like, he's unbelievable. And what is your take going back? We'll talk a little bit about the comparison between the two contracts in a second, but Colton, what's your original thought? What were you thinking at the time that Draisaitl signed that deal? And 2, what do you think about that deal now? Like, if you could just kind of give us your thoughts on what it was then and what it is now.
At the time, it kind of looked like a deal you see lots of younger players sign, where you're paying for the potential they're going to grow into. I think it was right after he'd had that first big season. He had about 75 points right in there. So I really didn't have much of a problem with it at the time. I didn't see him turning into the player he did now. I was hoping that he would just stay at that level. So obviously now looking at it, it's really one of the, I guess, few good things Shirley was able to do in his time here. It's like you said, it turned into one of the better bargain deals in the entire league. So I think he's just going to continue to get better too. So I think that contract will be incredible for the entire time, or the entire 4 years that are left.
Yeah, we look at it now and we talk about, and Brian and I and the guys last week talked about this window that the Oilers have opened. A 4-year window basically is guaranteed a 4-year window, because Leon Draisaitl is the first guy whose contract is going to expire of this new leadership core between Nugent Hopkins, McDavid, Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, and Darnell Nurse. Draisaitl's deal ends first. It's got 4 years left. Are we looking at a situation now where we're going, oh man, why do we only have 4 years left of Leon Draisaitl at $8.5 million, when just a few years ago we were going, oh my God, this is so expensive. Why would they give this much money to this guy? He's good, but he can't be that good, is he, Brian? How weird is it that we're looking at it now from that perspective, going, oh man, if only we had this guy for longer, when we all freaked out. I didn't, but a lot of people freaked out about this deal when it was signed.
Makes you wonder in like 4 or 5 years how people will be reacting to the Darnell Nurse deal.
That's
right?
exactly where I was going to go next.
Yeah. I remember, like, it doesn't, to be honest, I don't remember much what the reaction was about at the time. I remember to myself thinking that's a little bit high for what he's done so far. But I mean, obviously, that's a Cirelli signing, isn't it? I guess we got to give him some props here.
Yeah, there was a Shirley. I mean, he did some really strange things. We're looking back at the Koskinen deal and other stuff like that. We're going, what the heck? But the Leon Draisaitl one turned out to be really, really strong. I do remember at the time, I remember personally thinking, you know what, it's high. And I remember all of the concern about how long it was taking to get done. And he had gone back home to Germany and he signed his papers in Germany. Like, he was sitting around his bar with his dad when they took a picture of him signing that contract. I remember it. And he's just so happy. He looks so happy. And everybody's like, oh my God, $8.5 million. That's so much money. But I remember it also being around that time when we started to realize that this is the way the NHL was going to go. This was about paying for players and what you believe they will become. And there was a lot of talk about how good Draisaitl was going to be, and that some people had him as one of the best picks in that draft. If you look back at that draft now, he absolutely was the best pick in that draft and the best player to come out of it. But some people, not very many people had him pegged to do what he's done, except for a very small handful of people who were like, man, this is a good player that the Oilers just got. And he's proven that, time and time again now, that we know consistently that he's fantastic. So I do remember there being a lot of money. I personally was like, well, this is a gamble. It's a bit of a risk, but it's going to be one of those risks that either pays off really, really well, or we're going to look back at this and go, man, we committed a lot of money to a guy that never quite panned out the way that we thought he was going to. So Brian brought it up, Colton. I'll ask you, are we going to be looking back at the Darnell Nurse deal the same way we look at this Draisaitl deal now, where at the time it was kind of pricey and we're like, oof, he better live up to this. Don't know if he can. Can Darnell Nurse exceed expectations like Draisaitl has?
I'll say no, just due to the fact that he's not nearly as young. So I still think Nurse can get better. I don't think he'll improve as much as Draisaitl has in that time. I think he can continue to play at that level where he's worth the contract, but I don't think you'll ever look at it like this and say it's one of the better deals throughout the league.
The only reason I'll disagree with you, I like your opinion. I get where you're going with that, and I totally agree with your take on it. But the one thing I think we're probably maybe forgetting or ignoring or not giving enough credibility to is just where this cap is going to be in 3 or 4 years, right? Like, we might be looking at this 9.25 right now and going, holy moly, that's a lot of money for a defenseman. And all these defensemen are getting way too much money. And we're all saying, but what happens if somebody of Darnell Nurse's level, that was a tongue twister, can't, is getting 11, 12, like that's realistic in 5 years. Like, that could absolutely be the case. And then we were looking at this going, okay, well, yeah, he's played right at the 9.25 level, but these guys are all getting 11 and 12, and they're not as good as him. Brian, you brought it up. I think, I can't remember what you said last week. Is he going to exceed these expectations on this contract? Like, he's progressed at such a crazy level. And I think Colton's right. I don't think he's going to progress like Draisaitl just flipped the switch and was like one of the best players in hockey. But Nurse has really gotten better year after year after year. And he took a massive step last year. Can he keep taking those steps to make it so that we're looking at this deal in 4 years' time and going, man, that's a pretty good deal?
Well, it was well put by Colton there that I think he is he's further along his career evolution, I guess, if you will, than Draisaitl is. So I guess the ceiling from where he is right now to what he can get to, the gap is probably not as large as it was when Draisaitl signed that deal. But that said, I still think I love Darnell Nurse, and I'm glad they ponied up to keep him. This is what you have to pay to keep a guy like this. I still think it's a monstrous contract, but like we got into last week, the bar was set with all these other crazy defensive signings around the league. Completely. And I think the reason we may look back in a few years, if we do look back and say that it's a steal of a deal, it's because the cap has continued to go up, or will be going up to a higher degree, and salaries will follow suit. But he's probably getting pretty close to his peak where he is. I think one of the things that I believe has really bettered his game in the last couple of years is the cerebral side of things. And I think that's just part of, a player getting more experience and maturing. And I think that's one area where he can really get better. And I think when you see some of the, the Chelioses and the Lidstroms, the Prongers, all these guys that were tremendously effective defensemen. Hopefully Duncan Keith.
I was just going to say, hopefully Duncan Keith, right?
Yeah. Like that's once they get to that stage of their careers, it's their mind as much as anything else that makes them so effective. And I think Darnell Nurse can be that guy. And he'll still, I say only, but he'll be younger than Duncan Keith is right now than when this deal expires.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. And one thing I will point out, if I'm trying to be like a glasses half full kind of guy, is that defensemen take a lot longer to get to that peak point than forwards do in the NHL, right? We hear this all the time, that it takes a while for the defenseman to figure out where they fit in the league and how to be the most effective version of themselves. And maybe that's what we're seeing from Nurse right now. Maybe he's kind of figured it out and he's going, okay, now I've got my handle around this game. I can really start to put myself in that spot. So it'll be interesting to see if we're looking back at this and going, man, that Draisaitl deal looks outstanding now. Will we say the same thing about Nurse? We'll see. Before we leave, I want to ask you guys a question that has been very hot topic, and it's not necessarily related to the Oilers, but everybody's got an opinion about it today as we record this. So I want to get your take on this too. Colton, I'll start with you. The NHL has said and approved that they will let 3-inch by 3.5-inch ads on the jersey starting in the 2022-23 NHL season. One, what's your take on this? And two, is it as big a deal as everybody thinks it's or making it out to be?
Well, I think a big reasoning behind it, obviously, is all the money they lost due to the pandemic, a lot of lost games, TV deals, all that. My take on it, honestly, is if they just stay at that one ad, like you were saying, it's a pretty small space. I think maybe you'll notice it at the beginning and then really it doesn't have much of an effect. The only thing I'd say is I don't want it to turn into some of the jerseys you see over in certain European leagues where it's just sponsors everywhere kind of thing. And I can't see them doing that. So with what it is now, I really don't think it's a big deal.
You don't want the NHL to turn into the Spengler Cup?
No, exactly.
Brian, what's your opinion on this? Are you shocked at this? Is it even remotely surprising?
Yeah, water off my back. I really don't care. It's interesting though that I've seen two camps of this. There's people that are flying off the handle, like, this is sacrilege. You don't put logos on jerseys. What next, et cetera, et cetera. And then you got the other camp, people who are all psyched up and they're like, okay, I wonder who the sponsor is going to be on my favorite team, right? I mean, people who are excited. So there's kind of two sides to it. This is the direction sports is going in. And I don't think you notice it. I mean, the CFL did it a number of years ago. The NBA's introduced it the last couple of years. Watching either of those now, I really don't even notice them anymore. So yeah, it's this is just, everything's an advertisement now, right? This is where it's all headed. So
well, and the NHL had to do this. Like it lost so much money and it made so much money with the helmet logos, which by the way, I don't even notice. Like, in fact, I see them and I think they should be there. That's how much I look. The only time I even notice those helmet logos is when we're looking at pictures and we're creating articles for the Hockey Writers and we're doing things like that. And it's a picture of someone on the bench and you see their side view with the helmet. And then you can sort of see the logo, but I don't think it looks weird. Right.
Yeah. It's like, I couldn't even right now in the middle of summer, I could not tell you who the Oilers helmet logo was. And that's unbelievable. I don't even remember right now.
I'm pretty sure it's Rogers, but yeah, no, for sure. But you know what? Like, and the other thing I'll say too, is when we see the little crest area on the jersey, we've seen it already, like the 50th anniversary of this or the 100 years of hockey, that, or anything that they do to celebrate a milestone in the NHL, for most teams, that's where they put it. And has anybody ever freaked out about those? No, like nobody ever looks at those and says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that they sacrificed." Like, why would anybody care? Like, it just doesn't even make sense. And for the people that are freaking out about these jerseys and buying them and stuff, like, I think you could buy both, can't you? Like, if you're an NBA fan and you want to buy the jersey with or without the logo, can't you just buy both options? Like, you can choose to get one with it and get one without it. In fact, I think it's harder to find the ones with the logos. So if you're big on
the ones with the logos on are the like authentic, expensive ones. The replicas, don't have on it.
Yeah. So if you don't want the logo, it's pretty easy to not get the logo. So
that's right.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm with you. I mean, remember years and years ago, I bet you people freaked out about the advertisements on boards, or when we watch the hockey games on the glass at the end of the goal line where it's digital and it changes while we're watching the hockey. I mean, nobody cares about those anymore. Like, we might've been like, "Oh, that's weird," and noticed, when did that show up there? Right. And we noticed it, but now no one cares. Like, no, I can't even imagine that anybody a week or two into the season is going to be talking about these logos. In fact, everybody's going to look at this goal. That was probably really smart, because they're going to make about $150 million just by selling the space on a jersey. You know what I mean? So between the helmet logos and the jersey logos, that's $250 million the NHL is bringing in to the league that they badly needed because of the pandemic. I don't know what else the argument would be. It just seems crazy.
Naming rights, right? I mean, 30, 40 years ago, no one had a sponsored arena name. Now pretty much everybody does, and we just get used to it.
Here's what I want to see. I want to see one company say, "Okay, I'm willing to do this, but I just want to put a logo on McDavid." You know what I mean? Because that dude is on TV all the time. He's a human highlight reel. Imagine what that real estate is worth, right? You put a logo on his jersey, you're going to be on television, and you're going to be on television a lot. Like, that's probably the most valuable stuff. And these logos are interesting because some teams don't sell for more than like $700,000, and some teams in the NBA are charging $20 million. Like, so if you're the Lakers or whatever team is just the Golden State Warriors, probably you're charging an arm and a leg for those ad spots. Whereas if you're a team that nobody even pays attention to, you're not charging a whole lot. So it's going to be very interesting to see where the differences between the ad revenue comes in for these teams and certain players. They're not at a point, I can't imagine that they'll ever do it with the NHL, where they'll sell individual names for, I just don't see it. Just going to be team only, but it'd be very interesting if anybody ever asks and says, "Well, what would it cost me to get the McDavid spot? Or what would it cost me to get the Crosby or an Ovechkin?" Like, Austin Matt, like, wouldn't that be something that actually
I can only afford the Koskinen, so
yeah, that's right. Yeah, give me the guy that might be in and out of the lineup every once in a while. How often will it cost me to be in half of your games? You know what I mean? Like, that'll be very interesting. All right, guys, one more question before we go. Do you think there's going to be any news for us to talk about next week? Every time we do this show, there's always something the next day. Colton, do you think they're going to give us, the Oilers will give us any news that we can bring home for next week and have a show that we can build around?
Trying to think of maybe the Yamamoto signing. I'll say that.
Okay. Brian, what about you? Because the only real business is that and a goalie.
Yeah, of course they will, right? This is what I said last week. It's what I said the week before. We'll be talking about something next week.
It's ironic. Julian's the one who's not here today. I think I was making fun of him last week. I said, that's just because Ken Holland loves you so much, Julian, that he watches your show and then he just doesn't want to go a week without watching you. So if all of a sudden we don't have any news, so Holland will do something just so there'll be a show next week, right?
Well, he's saving the earth-shattering move that's coming next for Julian's return next week.
That's right. He must have caught wind that Julian wasn't going to be with us tonight. And so
that big goalie trade, that's coming down tomorrow morning.
Yeah, it'll probably happen right after our show goes live or goes posted on YouTube and Facebook and stuff. Anyway, all right, guys, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. Colton and Brian, on behalf of myself, Jim Parsons and the HockeyWriters.com. It's been another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. We hope that you guys join us next week. I'm assuming we'll have a show. We love doing it. So we'll probably talk next week. And don't forget, hit the like button on Facebook, like button on YouTube, the notification button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you guys next week.